This isn't just some story I made up to get views. It's something that actually happened to me. It's the kind of thing you think only happens in movies, until it happens to you, and you realize life can be far crueler and more unbelievable than fiction. The crystal flute of champagne in my hand felt slick with condensation, a cold anchor in the dizzying heat of the rooftop bar at the Waldorf Astoria in Beverly Hills. Below us, the lights of Los Angeles sprawled out like a fallen constellation, indifferent and beautiful. My best friend Isabelle was on a small, brightly lit stage, her silhouette framed by a massive banner that read, Aura Cosmetics, Launch Gala. It was the name I had whispered to her on a late-night phone call, the name I had doodled in 100 notebooks, the name that was supposed to be mine. She raised her microphone, a smug, radiant smile on her face, and as she looked out at the adoring crowd of influencers and investors, her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, and in them I saw not a hint of guilt, only triumphant, chilling dismissal. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. The name Aura wasn't just a word. It was the culmination of my entire life. I wasn't born into money like Isabelle. My world was a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Echo Park that I shared with my mom, a seamstress who worked her fingers raw to make sure I never felt poor, even though we were. She taught me about colors, not from art books, but from the spools of thread that lined our walls like a library of rainbows. She'd hold up a swatch of silk and say, "See, Clara? This isn't just red. It's the color of a poppy in the morning sun. It has a feeling, an energy, an aura." That's where it began. While other kids played with dolls, I played with my mom's sewing box, mixing her discarded eyeshadow powders with Vaseline on a chipped saucer, trying to create the exact shade of a California sunset. That was my passion. Makeup wasn't about covering things up. It was about expressing the color of your soul. Isabelle and I met in a freshman art class at UCLA. She was the girl who had everything: a black Range Rover, a condo in Santa Monica her father paid for, and an effortless, golden confidence that drew people to her like moths. I was the scholarship kid with a worn-out backpack and a packed lunch. But we bonded over a shared love for Impressionist art, for the way Monet could capture the feeling of light on water. She loved my eye for color, my weird, obsessive little notebooks filled with formulas and shade names. "You see the world differently, Clara," she'd say, flipping through pages of my sketches for a new kind of liquid highlighter I called Starlight Dew. "It's like you can see the energy in things." Over the next 4 years, she became my person, my confidant. We spent countless nights on the floor of my tiny apartment, surrounded by takeout containers and chemistry textbooks, as I worked on my formulas. I was a cosmetic chemistry major, a path I chose specifically for this dream. Isabelle was a business major. It seemed perfect. "You're the artist, I'm the numbers girl," she'd joke. "One day we'll build an empire." I believed her. I trusted her with every secret, every idea, every fragile hope. I showed her my business plan, a 50-page document I'd poured my soul into, detailing everything from sourcing ethical mica to a revolutionary direct-to-consumer marketing strategy. And I shared the name. We were sitting on the beach in Malibu, watching the sky bleed from orange to purple when I told her. "I want to call it Aura," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "because makeup should be an extension of your own light, your own energy." She had squeezed my hand, her eyes wide with what I thought was genuine excitement. "Clara, it's perfect," she breathed. "It's you." After graduation, I took a low-paying job as a lab tech at a small cosmetics manufacturer in Burbank to save money. Every spare dollar, every waking hour went into my brand. I perfected my formulas, designed the packaging, and started the long, arduous process of finding investors. Isabelle, meanwhile, seemed supportive. She'd take me out to dinner at fancy places I could never afford, like Spago or Providence, letting me vent about my frustrations. "Don't worry," she'd say, swirling a glass of expensive Cabernet. "Your talent is undeniable. The right people will see it." She introduced me to a few people, casual meetings that never went anywhere. Looking back, I see them for what they were: reconnaissance missions. She was gauging my progress, mining me for contacts, seeing how close I was. The first real crack in the facade appeared about 6 months before the launch party. I had a promising meeting set up with a boutique venture capital firm in Century City that specialized in female-founded startups. It was my big shot. The night before, I called Isabelle, a nervous wreck, and walked her through my entire pitch deck one last time. What do you think? Is the valuation too aggressive? Is the marketing slide clear enough? I asked, desperate for her reassurance. She was brilliant, peppering me with sharp questions, suggesting tiny tweaks. Just be yourself, C, she said. They'll love you. The next morning, 2 hours before my meeting, I got an email. Dear Ms. Evans, it read, we regret to inform you that we must cancel our meeting today. The partners have decided to pursue a different investment in the beauty sector that was recently brought to our attention. We wish you the best of luck. It was a cold corporate blow. I was devastated. When I told Isabelle, she was overflowing with sympathy. Those idiots, she seethed. They don't know what they just passed up. We'll find someone better. She always said I should have been suspicious. I should have seen the signs. The way she started deflecting my questions about her own career, giving vague answers about consulting for her dad's firm. The way she stopped asking to see my new formula samples. The silence was not the absence of interest. It was the quiet of a predator that has already secured its prey. The final piece I needed was the trademark. I had saved for months to pay the USPTO filing fees. On April 12th, I officially filed for the trademark Aura Cosmetics. I remember celebrating that night with a $5 bottle of Prosecco, texting Isabelle a picture of the confirmation email. Her reply came back instantly. OMG, so official. Congrats, babe. It was 3 weeks later that I got the invitation. An embossed, cream-colored cardstock that felt heavy in my hand. Isabelle DeLuca cordially invites you to the exclusive launch of Aura Cosmetics. My blood ran cold. It had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. I called her, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. 10 times, no answer. I drove to her condo, my beat-up Honda Civic feeling utterly pathetic as I pulled up to the valet at her luxury high-rise. The concierge stopped me. I'm sorry, Miss Evans, but Ms. DeLuca has left specific instructions that she is not to be disturbed. She's in final prep for her launch event. Her launch event. Not ours. Hers. And that's how I ended up on that rooftop, dressed in the one nice dress I owned, watching my best friend stand on a stage and steal my life right out from under me. As she finished her speech, a cascade of gold and white confetti rained down, and the crowd erupted in applause. She held up a lipstick tube, sleek, minimalist, white with gold lettering, exactly as I had designed it. Welcome, she said, her voice booming with false sincerity, to the future of beauty. Welcome to Aura. My champagne flute slipped from my fingers and shattered on the polished concrete, but I barely heard it over the sound of my own world breaking apart. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't scream or cry or run up on that stage and tackle her, though every cell in my body screamed for it. I just turned and walked away, a ghost at my own funeral. The elevator ride down from the rooftop felt like a descent into a new, colder reality. The cheerful music, the soft ding of the floors passing, it all felt like a mockery. When I got out into the lobby, a place of gleaming marble and hushed opulence, I saw her. Isabelle's mother, Catherine DeLuca, was standing near the entrance, speaking with a man in a tailored suit. She was a woman carved from ice, with a smile that never quite reached her piercing blue eyes. She spotted me, and her perfect smile tightened by a millimeter. Clara, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I'm surprised to see you here. I couldn't find my voice. I just stared at her, my mind a maelstrom of confusion and pain. Isabelle is having her moment, Catherine continued, taking a delicate step closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial hiss. She has worked so hard for this. It would be a shame if someone created unpleasantness. It was a threat, wrapped in the silk of high society. She knew. Of course she knew. She had probably funded the entire thing. The betrayal wasn't just Isabelle's. It was a family affair. I finally found my words hoarse and brittle. She stole it from me, everything. The name, the formulas, the plan. It was all mine. Catherine's expression didn't flicker. She let out a small, dismissive laugh, a sound like cracking ice. My dear, ideas are a dime a dozen. Execution is everything. You had a little hobby. Isabelle built a business. You should be happy for your friend's success. She patted my arm, a gesture that was meant to feel like a sting, and it did. Then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, utterly humiliated, utterly alone. The next few weeks were a blur of numb disbelief. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, gasping for air. The image of Isabelle on that stage burned into my brain. My tiny apartment felt like a prison, its walls lined with the ghosts of my dead dream. The notebooks, the lab equipment, the sample boxes, they were all monuments to my failure, to my stupidity. How could I have been so blind? So trusting? I unfollowed her on social media, but Aura was inescapable. It was everywhere. Glossy ads in magazines, sponsored posts from every major beauty influencer, a glowing feature on a morning talk show where Isabelle, looking poised and brilliant, talked about how she came up with the concept for Aura during a moment of spiritual clarity in Bali. She spun a beautiful, intricate lie about her solo journey of creation, never once mentioning my name. She had erased me from my own story. Her lawyers were the next blow. A thick envelope arrived by courier, containing a cease and desist letter. It was from a top-tier law firm in Century City, the kind with names of 10 partners etched in brass on the door. The letter was brutal. It accused me of a campaign of harassment against Ms. DeLuca, citing my unwanted presence at her private event and my delusional claims of ownership over her intellectual property. It demanded I make no further contact with Isabelle or any employee of Aura Cosmetics, and that I immediately cease and desist from making any public or private statements claiming any involvement with the brand. If I failed to comply, they would pursue all available legal remedies to the fullest extent of the law. It was a declaration of war, designed to terrify me into silence. And it almost worked. Reading those words, printed on heavy, expensive paper, I felt a crushing sense of hopelessness. They had infinite money. They had power and connections. What did I have? A chemistry degree, a mountain of student debt, and a broken heart. For a week, I wallowed. I let the despair wash over me. I considered just letting it go, moving to another city, starting over, and trying to forget any of it ever happened. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting on my floor, surrounded by legal papers I couldn't afford, and rejection letters from jobs I didn't want, when my mom called. She knew something was wrong. I hadn't been answering her calls. I finally picked up, and the whole story just poured out of me in a torrent of sobs. I told her everything. When I was done, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I thought she was going to tell me to be careful, to not pick a fight I couldn't win. My mom was a practical woman, but that's not what she said. Clara, she said, her voice quiet but fierce, like a striking match. I did not raise a daughter who lets bullies win. That name came from my sewing room. Those colors came from your heart. You go and you fight for what is yours. That was it. That was the spark. The sadness didn't disappear, but something new ignited alongside it. Rage. A cold, clear, clarifying anger. Catherine DeLuca was wrong. My dream wasn't a hobby. It was my life's work. And Isabelle wasn't just a friend who made a mistake. She was a thief, and I was going to make her pay. The first step was to find a lawyer who would even listen to me. I couldn't afford the Century City Sharks, so I started digging. I spent days in the law library at UCLA, searching for intellectual property lawyers who worked on contingency, who had a history of taking on big corporations. I made a list of 20 names. The first 17 either didn't call back or gave me a polite 5-minute rejection. They heard big cosmetics launch and daughter of wealthy industrialist, and immediately saw a losing, expensive battle. I was on my last dregs of hope when I walked into the office of Daniel Chen. His office wasn't in a glass tower. It was a small, cluttered space above a ramen shop in Koreatown. Daniel was young, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes, a sharp mind, and a hunger to make a name for himself. He listened to my entire story without interruption, his face unreadable. He looked through my notebooks, my business plan, the cease and desist letter. When I was finished, he leaned back in his squeaky chair and steepled his fingers. Okay, he said slowly. They're trying to steamroll you. It's a classic Goliath tactic. But they made a mistake. He tapped the printout of my USPTO trademark filing confirmation. You filed on April 12th. An intent-to-use application. It's a placeholder, but it's a powerful one. It establishes your priority date. When did she file? I didn't know. He spun around to his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. A few moments later, he grunted. Here it is. Aura Cosmetics, LLC, owned by Isabelle DeLuca, filed on April 29th, 17 days after you." He turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of a predatory smile. She was sloppy. She probably thought you'd never actually file or that her lawyers could just crush you if you did. "This date. This is our entire case. This is our slingshot." He explained the legal landscape to me. It wasn't just trademark infringement. It was trade secret misappropriation. My formulas, my marketing plan, my supplier lists, those were all confidential, proprietary information that I had shared with her under an implicit assumption of trust, a trust she had systematically violated. The case would be brutal, he warned. They would dig into my life, try to discredit me, paint me as an incompetent, obsessed failure. It would cost a fortune in billable hours, discovery, and expert witnesses. "I'll take it on contingency," he said, seeing the look on my face. 35% of whatever we win. But you have to work. You're going to be my lead paralegal on this. You know the evidence better than anyone. Every email, every text, every notebook entry. We need to build a timeline so airtight, so detailed, that by the time we get to court, they'll already be drowning. For the first time in months, I felt a sliver of hope. It wasn't just hope. It was the promise of a fight. I looked at Daniel, the cluttered office, the sirens wailing on the street below, and I nodded. "Okay," I said, my voice steady. "Let's go to war." The war began not with a bang, but with the quiet, relentless avalanche of legal paperwork. Daniel filed our complaint in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California. We sued for trademark infringement, unfair competition, and misappropriation of trade secrets. We didn't just sue Aura Cosmetics. We sued Isabelle DeLuca personally. We wanted to pierce the corporate veil and hold her directly accountable. The response from her legal team was swift and contemptuous. They filed a motion to dismiss, calling our lawsuit frivolous and without merit, a transparent attempt to extort a successful entrepreneur. They painted me as a disgruntled former friend, a failed amateur who was jealous of Isabelle's innate business acumen. Reading their motion felt like being kicked in the stomach. They twisted our friendship, our shared memories, into something ugly and transactional. They claimed I was never serious about the business, that it was just a creative outlet for me. Daniel had warned me this would happen. "It's all noise," he said, calmly highlighting passages in their motion. "They have no substance, so they attack the plaintiff. Our job is to ignore the noise and build our fortress of facts." And that's what we did. My tiny apartment transformed into a war room. We had whiteboards covering the walls, mapping out timelines, evidence chains, and witness lists. I became an archaeologist of my own life, digging through years of digital communication. Every email I ever sent Isabelle with an updated business plan. Every text message where I excitedly told her about a new formula breakthrough. Every time-stamped Google Doc. I found the original file for my pitch deck, the one I had walked her through the night before my canceled VC meeting. The file's metadata was a digital fingerprint, showing it was created by me on my laptop, months before Aura Cosmetics was even incorporated as a company. This was a cornerstone. The discovery process was a brutal slog. They buried us in document requests, demanding every single piece of paper related to my alleged business, hoping to overwhelm us, to make us miss a deadline. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee and takeout ramen from the shop downstairs. I cataloged every piece of evidence, cross-referencing dates and conversations, creating a massive, undeniable record of my work and her deception. Then came the depositions. Mine was first. We sat in a sterile conference room in her lawyer's high-rise office. Isabelle was there, sitting next to her lead attorney, a slick, silver-haired man named Marcus Thorne. She looked perfect, dressed in a crisp white suit, her face a mask of calm indifference. She wouldn't look at me. Thorne grilled me for 10 hours straight. He was condescending, aggressive, and manipulative. He tried to trip me up on dates, to twist my words, to make me seem unstable. "Ms. Evans, isn't it true that you and my client were very close friends?" He'd ask. "Yes," I'd reply. "And isn't it true that friends often share ideas, dreams, little hobbies they have?" He'd continue, his tone dripping with disdain. "This was not a hobby," I said, my voice cold and even, just as Daniel had coached me. "This was a fully developed business plan, supported by 2 years of chemical research and development, which Ms. DeLuca stole." He tried to portray me as a failure. "You were working as a lab tech, correct? Not running a company?" You never secured any funding, did you? I had a meeting with a venture capital firm, I said, looking directly at Isabelle for the first time. But it was mysteriously canceled the morning of, right after I had shared my entire pitch with your client. A tiny, almost imperceptible muscle twitched in Isabelle's jaw. I knew she remembered. I held his gaze, refusing to be baited, refusing to cry, refusing to show any emotion other than unshakable conviction. By the end of the day, I was exhausted, but I knew I hadn't broken. Isabelle's deposition was a masterclass in deflection and feigned ignorance. It was our turn to question her, and Daniel was relentless. We held it in his small, cramped office, a strategic choice to put her on our turf, to strip away her corporate armor. She claimed the name Aura came to her in a dream. She claimed her formulas were developed in-house by chemists she hired, even though we had evidence they were nearly identical to the ones I had documented in my notebooks. When Daniel presented her with the emails I had sent her, she'd stare at them for a long time before answering. "Oh, I vaguely remember this," she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand. Clara was always sending me her little projects. I was just trying to be a supportive friend. The key moment came when Daniel brought up my pitch deck. We presented her with a copy of her own deck, the one she'd used to get her funding, and a copy of mine. He put them side by side on the conference table. "Ms. DeLuca," he began, his voice dangerously soft, "can you explain why entire paragraphs, word for word from Ms. Evans's business plan, which she emailed to you on March 4th, appear in your investor pitch deck dated April 1st? She stared at the documents. Her perfect composure began to fray at the edges. "It's a coincidence," she stammered. "The language of business plans can be very similar. Is it also a coincidence that the financial projections, down to the dollar, are identical? That the 5-year growth strategy outline is a mirror image?" Daniel pressed, his voice rising. "Are you telling this deposition, under oath, that you independently created a document that is, in large parts, a verbatim copy of a document your friend, who is now suing you, sent you just weeks before?" Thorne jumped in, objecting, but the damage was done. For the first time, Isabelle looked cornered. She looked scared. It was in that moment, seeing that crack in her invincible facade, that I knew we had a real chance. We had drawn first blood. The war was far from over, but we were no longer just defending. We were attacking. The months leading up to the trial were the most intense of my life. Isabelle's legal team tried every trick in the book to drain our resources and morale. They filed motion after motion, trying to get key pieces of our evidence excluded. They tried to have the case thrown out on summary judgment, arguing there was no real dispute of the facts. Each time, Daniel fought back with meticulously crafted counter-arguments, citing obscure case law and precedents he'd found in sleepless nights of research. We won every single motion. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Esther Feinberg, was clearly growing tired of their delay tactics. This gave us a small surge of confidence. While the legal battle raged, Aura Cosmetics was exploding. Isabelle was a master of marketing. She was on the cover of a business magazine, hailed as a visionary entrepreneur. Her products were getting rave reviews and selling out in Sephora. It was a surreal, painful experience to walk past a storefront and see my dream, my stolen dream, being celebrated by the world, all under her name. It fueled my resolve. I spent my days working with Daniel and my nights doing my own research. I started thinking like a detective. Where else could she have been sloppy? I went back through every memory, every conversation. I remembered her mentioning a freelance graphic designer she used for some personal projects around the time she was stealing my company. On a hunch, I started searching design portfolios online. It took me a week, sifting through hundreds of websites, but I finally found him. And there it was, in his online portfolio, under a section labeled Branding Concepts. It was the original logo for Aura, a minimalist, elegant design. My design. But the caption read, Logo and Brand Identity for Aura Cosmetics. Client, Isabelle DeLuca. And crucially, the project date was listed, March 15th. This was just 11 days after I had sent Isabelle my complete business plan, which included my own sketches for the logo. And nearly a month before I had filed my trademark. This was huge. This was an independent third-party witness who could testify that Isabelle had hired him to create the branding using my concepts, long before she claimed to have come up with the idea herself. Daniel was ecstatic. We contacted the designer's lawyer. At first, he was hesitant, caught between a former client and a legal battle. But when we showed him my original dated sketches and explained the situation, he agreed to testify. He didn't want his name attached to a case of fraud. He provided us with his original invoices and email communications with Isabelle. In one email, she had written, "Please find attached some initial sketches for the logo direction I want to go in. Let's make it look professional, but keep the core concept." The attachment was a scanned image of a page from my notebook. It was the smoking gun. The trial began on a crisp October morning. The federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles was an imposing, sterile building. Walking in felt like stepping into another world. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined, paneled in dark wood, which seemed to absorb all the sound. Isabelle and her team were already there, a formidable phalanx of expensive suits. She looked straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge my existence. The jury was selected, a panel of ordinary people who would decide the fate of my life's work. Daniel's opening statement was a masterpiece. He didn't paint me as a victim. He painted me as an innovator and artist. He told the story of my childhood, of mixing makeup on a chipped saucer, of my dedication and passion. Then he told the story of a friendship, and how that friendship was used as a weapon in a calculated, methodical theft of intellectual property. When Marcus Thorne gave his opening statement, he was just as slick and condescending as he'd been in the deposition. He portrayed Isabelle as the true genius, a business prodigy who took a friend's vague, amateurish ideas and turned them into a billion-dollar brand. He painted me as a parasite, someone trying to latch onto her success after the fact. "This is a case about jealousy," he concluded, looking right at the jury. "Pure and simple." The first few days of the trial were a methodical presentation of our evidence. We walked the jury through the timeline, showing them the emails, the Google Docs with their creation dates, the side-by-side comparisons of my business plan and her pitch deck. Daniel had our digital forensics expert testify, explaining how the metadata proved, without a doubt, that my documents were the source material. You could see the jury starting to understand. Their faces, initially neutral, began to show flickers of doubt whenever they looked at Isabelle. Then, we called the graphic designer to the stand. He was nervous, but his testimony was devastatingly effective. He calmly identified the sketches Isabelle had sent him as the ones we presented as evidence from my notebooks. He confirmed the dates he was hired and the instructions he was given. Thorne's cross-examination was aggressive, but the designer held firm. "The concepts were provided to me by Ms. DeLuca," he stated plainly. My job was to refine them. The final witness was me. Stepping up to the witness stand was the most terrifying moment of my life. My entire future hinged on my ability to tell my story, clearly and believably, under the intense scrutiny of a hostile lawyer. Daniel walked me through my testimony gently, letting me tell the jury, in my own words, how I developed Aura, the passion I poured into it, and the deep sense of trust I had placed in Isabelle. I didn't cry. I kept my voice steady, even when recounting the moment of betrayal on that rooftop. Thorne's cross-examination was a hurricane. He tried to discredit my chemistry background. He belittled my business knowledge. He read old text messages out of context to make it sound like I was flighty and unfocused. His strategy was to make me look like an emotional, hysterical woman who couldn't possibly have created something so successful. The final question he asked was meant to be the kill shot. "Ms. Evans," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "isn't it true that you're just heartbroken that your friend became more successful than you? Isn't that what this is really all about? A broken friendship you're trying to put a price tag on?" The courtroom was silent. I took a deep breath and looked directly at the jury. I saw a woman in the front row, about my mother's age, her expression one of deep concentration. I spoke to her. "My friendship with Isabelle wasn't broken," I said, my voice clear and strong. "It was used. It was a tool she used to get what she wanted. I am heartbroken, yes. But this lawsuit isn't about my heart. It's about my work. It's about my name. It's about the truth." The final act of the trial was Isabelle's testimony. She walked to the stand with an air of unshakable confidence, smiling warmly at the jury. She was a phenomenal actress. She recounted her version of the story, the tale of a dream she had, of late nights spent building her empire from scratch. She painted me as a dear friend she desperately tried to help, but who was ultimately too disorganized to follow through on her ideas. She was smooth. She was believable, and for a terrifying moment, I worried the jury might be swayed by her charisma. But Daniel was ready. His cross-examination was surgical. He didn't raise his voice. He simply walked her back through the evidence, piece by piece. He started with the name. Ms. DeLuca, you testified that the name Aura came to you in a dream, correct? Yes, that's right, she said with a placid smile. A very specific dream, I'm sure. Can you tell the jury the date of this inspirational dream? Her smile faltered. I don't recall the exact date. It was a process. Was it before or after February 14th? The day Ms. Evans texted you. I finally decided on the perfect name for my brand. Aura? We have the records right here. Her face went pale. I don't remember that text. He moved on relentlessly. The business plan, the financial projections, the graphic designer. With each piece of evidence, another brick was pulled from the wall of her lies. The turning point came when Daniel projected the scanned page of my notebook, the one with my logo sketches, onto the large screen in the courtroom, next to the email Isabelle had sent to the designer. Ms. DeLuca, Daniel said, his voice echoing in the silent room. This is an exhibit from Ms. Evans's notebook dated January of last year, and this is your email to the designer from March. Can you explain to the jury how a drawing from Ms. Evans's private notebook, which she testified she showed you in confidence, ended up as an attachment in an email from you? Isabelle stared at the screen. Her composure finally shattered. The mask fell away, and for a second I saw the petty, entitled thief she truly was. She must have sent it to me, she stammered, her voice thin. I get so many emails, so many attachments. So your testimony is that you have no memory of receiving this specific drawing, yet you specifically chose it, attached it to an email, and instructed a designer to use it as the basis for your multi-million-dollar brand's logo? Daniel asked, letting the silence hang in the air. Is that correct? Isabelle just sat there, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. She looked at her lawyer, at the judge, anywhere but at the jury. Everyone in the room could see it. The lie had finally collapsed under its own weight. Marcus Thorne stood up and said, "No further questions, Your Honor." As Isabelle walked back to her seat, she shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was the look of a queen whose castle was crumbling. The closing arguments were the final battle. Thorne tried to salvage his case, arguing that even if Isabelle had been inspired by my ideas, it was her execution, her capital, her vision that made the company a success. He tried to minimize her actions as the kind of borrowing that happens between friends. When it was Daniel's turn, he stood before the jury and simply told the truth. "This isn't a case about inspiration," he said, his voice resonating with conviction. "It's a case about theft. A methodical, calculated plan to steal a woman's life's work by exploiting her trust and friendship. Isabelle DeLuca didn't just build a company on Clara Evans's ideas. She built it on Clara Evans' soul. And now, it is your duty to hold her accountable." He then laid out the damages we were seeking, not just the profits Aura had made, but punitive damages for the maliciousness of the act. The jury was out for 2 days. It was the longest 48 hours of my life. I couldn't eat or sleep. I just sat in my apartment, staring at the walls, waiting. My mom came and sat with me, holding my hand, not saying much, which was exactly what I needed. On the 3rd day, we got the call. The jury had reached a verdict. My heart hammered against my ribs as we filed back into the courtroom. The air was thick with tension. Isabelle was there, looking haggard, the polished confidence gone. The jury filed in, their faces grim and unreadable. The forewoman, the woman who reminded me of my mom, handed a slip of paper to the bailiff, who gave it to the judge. Judge Feinberg read it, her expression betraying nothing. "On the charge of trademark infringement," the judge began, her voice clear and steady, "we, the jury, find for the plaintiff, Clara Evans." A gasp went through the courtroom. I felt Daniel's hand squeeze my arm. "On the charge of misappropriation of trade secrets, we, the jury, find for the plaintiff, Clara Evans," the judge continued, and with each count, the same words came, "We find for the plaintiff." Finally, she got to the damages. The jury awarded us every dollar of profit Aura Cosmetics had ever made. Then came the punitive damages. The number was staggering, enough to not only bankrupt the company, but to cripple Isabelle's personal finances for years to come. The judge also granted our request for a permanent injunction, ordering Aura Cosmetics to immediately cease all sales and destroy all products bearing the name and logo. It was total, complete annihilation. Isabelle let out a strangled sob and slumped in her chair, her face ashen. Her mother, sitting in the front row, just stared blankly. Her icy composure finally melted. I had won. I had taken on the giant, and I had won. There was no triumphant celebration. When I walked out of the courthouse, past the scrum of reporters that had gathered, I didn't feel elation. I just felt quiet. The rage that had fueled me for so long had burned itself out, leaving behind a strange, hollow calm. Over the next few months, the empire Isabelle had built on my stolen dreams crumbled to dust. The injunction forced a massive recall. The company, unable to pay the court-ordered damages, was forced into bankruptcy. The press was merciless. The story of the betrayal, laid bare in the court transcripts, was far more compelling than any of her PR spin had ever been. She went from being a celebrated visionary to a pariah overnight. I heard through the grapevine that her family had to sell their home in Bel Air to cover her legal debts. She disappeared from the social scene, from the world she had so desperately wanted to conquer. I took some of the money from the settlement and finally took a real vacation. I went to Paris and sat in cafes, visited museums, and walked along the Seine. I needed to remember who I was without the fight, without the anger. When I came back, I started again. I had the name, the formulas, and now the capital to do it right. I rented a small lab space in Pasadena, hired a small dedicated team, and began to build. It was slow, it was methodical, and it was mine. Every single piece of it. About a year later, I was walking through a Sephora at the Grove. My new brand, Atelier, had just launched its first collection, and they had given us a small end cap display. The packaging was different, the logo was new, but the soul of the products, the Starlight Dew highlighter, the poppy-colored lipstick, it was all there. It was all me. I picked up a tester, dabbing a bit of the highlighter on the back of my hand, watching it catch the light. As I looked up, I saw my reflection in the security mirror on the ceiling, and in that moment, seeing myself standing there, surrounded by my own creations, born from a fight I never asked for but was proud to have won, a single, chilling thought came to me. She didn't just teach me the cost of betrayal. She taught me, in the cruelest way possible, exactly what my dream was worth. The end.